Dr. Denny's Burgers. I had never heard of the fast food restaurant before, but it looked open, and I really needed a coffee. 1 a.m. starts and road work can be absolutely brutal, and you need something to keep your hands warm. It can get dangerously cold out there. The illuminated menu of the drive-thru beamed brightly against the rural bushland. These LED beacons seemed very out of place in the middle of nowhere, but I wasn't complaining. A fiberglass mannequin of what I assumed was Denny stood leaning against the restaurant wall. He was a clown dressed in a stereotypical doctor's outfit, complete with white coat and stethoscope. I'm sure the intention of his placement was to be a fun mascot for the kids, but these fast food figures always gave me quite the opposite feeling. I slowly swerved my ute through the car park and approached the speaker to order. I pushed my window down and a crisp morning air flooded inside. A voice crackled out of the metal box.
Hi, what can I get you today?
It was either a man or the speaker was busted in a way that dropped the pitch. The voice definitely had a familiar quality to it. I leaned out of the vehicle in a bid to be heard as clearly as possible. Just a coffee, thanks mate. Flat white and full cream. Cheers. There was a spell of silence. It was like they were weighing up what I had just said. I wondered if they even did coffee there. They finally responded.
No problem. Drive on through.
I released my foot from the brake and slowly rounded the curb to the payment window. Strangely, I couldn't see any light spilling out from its frame. I stopped and peered into the building. I couldn't make out a whole lot, but there didn't seem to be any sign of noise or movement from within the kitchen. I reached out and rattled my fist against the glass. Nothing. I presumed they could be short-staffed, and therefore each section might not be in operation. I drove down to the food collection window and was met with a similar scene. It was locked, with a staff wanted sign taped to the glass. Nobody was around. It all started to feel a bit eerie, and an instinctive feeling began to bubble in my gut. Although the outside of the store was lit up like a Christmas tree, the place was a complete ghost town. I chose not to knock on the glass this time. At this point, I should have just left. I was going to be late for my job, and my boss was definitely going to yell at me. He always ran a very tight ship, and held the expectation that I should always be there before him. However, curiosity tickled my mind. Maybe I had missed something. Backing up the ute, I reversed the way I had just traveled. I slowly rounded the curb and arrived at my previous starting point, the beginning of the drive-thru. The black speaker stood tall amongst the stones and low-maintenance plants that surrounded its base. "Hello, me again," I started. The speaker remained quiet. "Are you guys open, or am I going the wrong way? I just went through. I passed the windows and there doesn't seem to be anyone inside." The speaker gave no indication that somebody was listening on the other side. My questions rang out into the night unanswered. I pondered if the late starts were finally getting to me. Had I really begun to hear things when I craved caffeine? I started to wind up my window when a familiar voice chimed.
My apologies, sir. We are extremely understaffed.
"Clearly," I replied, pushing my window back down.
It makes you wonder though, doesn't it?
"What?" The speaker waited a few seconds before answering.
It must make you wonder where my voice is coming from.
Somebody had to be messing with me. There must have been a kid, or someone who had gotten a hold of the speaker's headset and they were operating it from elsewhere. These were all my poor attempts to rationalize what was happening. I believed them to be true until the speaker emitted a large exhale. Whilst the noise was unnerving, the visual that followed gave me nightmares for weeks to come. Water vapor. The foggy cloud which follows your breath on cold mornings. It came from the speaker. It was breathing. I freaked. Adrenaline got the better of me, and I threw a punch at the speaker's cover. Tiny plastic fragments shattered everywhere from the point of impact. I had smashed a small hole which revealed a pair of damp vocal cords inside the metal box. The pink and slimy flesh was embedded with various wires from the speaker's system. I think they belonged to what was once a human. I shuddered thinking about whose they were. The cords moved and the speaker began to talk once more.
Would you like to join our staff?
Something slammed on the back of the windshield. I jumped. It was thumping on the glass as if a person was trying to get inside. Before I gave myself a chance to look, I released my foot from the brake. The ute began to roll backwards because I had forgotten it was still in reverse. I felt a body move under the wheels. As my ute backed out of the drive-thru, I feared to see the worst. I hoped for an animal or maybe a speed bump, but I was sure the shape had felt human. To my surprise, the Dr. Denny mannequin emerged from underneath. The clown laid sprawled out on the tarmac, still perfectly intact. A crooked smile was sprawled across his face. I wondered how it had moved from its former position, but I no longer wanted to wait around for answers. This was my opportunity to leave and never return. By the time I arrived at my worksite, I was considerably late. I would definitely cop a spray from the boss, but after everything that had happened, it seemed like the best case scenario. I remember thinking it would help take my mind off the horrible experience. As I exited my vehicle, I found him inside his truck, leaning over the steering wheel. He looked extremely pale and had his hands tightly wrapped around his neck. I knocked on the window, and he turned to me. Releasing his grip, blood poured from a slit in his throat. He couldn't utter a single word. That man liked his coffee as much as me. I realized then who the vocal cords belonged to. Back in the early 2000s, I was a young, attractive college girl, and I worked at a tiny coffee shop across the street from the school that I was attending. It was very small and never busy, so almost all of my shifts were solo. It was a drive-through only store, with an employee entrance and drive-up window at the front of the building. The bathroom was on the right side of the building, and there was also an exit door. It was located across campus from my apartment. I had walked to work that day, as I often did, because it was only about 5 minutes away and the weather was nice. I'd been there for a while, bored as usual doing my homework, when a brown van pulled up directly to the window. This was odd because you're supposed to order at the speaker near the large display menu, like most drive-thru experiences. It was also odd because the van was so creepy. It had blacked out windows in the back and had seen better days. 2 men stared at me from the van. The driver was an elderly man with long white hair and cold blue eyes. The passenger was a scruffy middle-aged man in an old baseball hat. I opened the window and asked, "Can I help you?" The smell of liquor radiated from the open window of the van. The driver said,
Linda, I'm so happy you're coming with us on our trip.
I immediately started to feel bad vibes and told him he was mistaken. He continued to insist that I was Linda and that I was coming with them on a trip. I'd never seen these men before in my life, and I suddenly realized just how alone I was. I told them, "I'm able to assist you with a drink order, but I'm not Linda and I'm not going anywhere." They finally left after a few minutes and never ordered anything. I took note of the license plate, and I was relieved to find that it was an easy one to remember. Judy's van is what it said. I locked both doors and the drive-through window after they left. I was creeped out for the rest of my shift, but didn't see the van again, so I figured it was just a strange encounter with 2 drunk men. Fast forward to closing time, and it was dark out. I was finishing up my nightly duties and gathering my things to leave. I was still slightly creeped out from the weird man in the van, so I kept my keys in my hand after I locked the coffee shop's front door from the outside. As I turned to start walking to my apartment, the same brown van pulled up quickly into the parking lot right next to me. I ran back to the front door of the coffee shop. The keys trembled in my hand. I unlocked the door, scurried into the building, and locked the door behind me. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. The bathroom had an exit to the side of the building, but no windows, so I had no idea what was happening outside at this point, or if the van was even still out there. I called my roommate and told her what was happening. She said she and her boyfriend would come and pick me up at the side exit. I waited in the bathroom, listening through the door, and heard footsteps outside. The door handle jiggled, and I froze in fear, but suddenly it stopped jiggling, and I heard nothing further at the door. My phone rang, and it was my roommate. She was waiting outside. I ran out the door and hopped in the back seat. She said the van peeled out of the parking lot as she pulled up. We set out to follow the van as I called the police to report these dudes. They were driving erratically, and at one point it became unsafe to continue following them. When the police showed up, the officer I spoke with said there was no record of registration for the license plate Judy's van. The officer said they would patrol the area, but that was really all they could do. I never heard anything else about it from the police, and I never saw that brown van or those creepy men again. I do still wonder how they knew when I'd be leaving and how long they'd been waiting for me. And who was Linda? Who was Judy? Did they take a trip with these men, but meet a different fate than I did?